Hi everyone, my name is Nasser Yassine. I'm a dietitian and exercise physiologist working at Clarence-Rockland Family Health Team, and today I'm going to present a short presentation on healthy eating and the Mediterranean diet. So first off, what is healthy eating? Um, for different individuals, there can be a different answer, right? But for some people, healthy eating can be, eating healthy whole foods from a variety of food groups, as we have listed over here: fruits, veggies, your whole grains, your proteins, plant-based proteins, as well as animal-based proteins, healthy fats and oils. For other people, it could be eating at regular times of the day, not skipping meals or snacks, maybe avoiding processed food or reducing refined sugars and sweeteners. So healthy eating applies to everyone, no matter what the person's age is, no matter if they're living with chronic disease or not, if they're active or not, and no matter what their body shape or size is. Healthy eating applies to everybody. And we're going to kind of tie this in with the Mediterranean diet today. So here we have the traditional healthy Mediterranean diet pyramid. And this is kind of what we're going to base ourselves on today as we go along in the presentation and look at the different components of the diet. So if you take a look, especially if you go at the bottom here, you'll see that the foundation of the diet is based on daily physical activity. There's lots of emphasis on different starches, breads, pastas, rice, whole grains, and other starches. So that can be a surprise for some people, seeing carbohydrates at the base of the pyramid. Then obviously high in fruits, vegetables, bean, legumes, and nuts. Olive oil being the main fat in this diet. And as you move up along the pyramid, you'll see there's less and less emphasis on the other foods higher up. So if you look at, let's say, dairy products, fish, and poultry, you're looking at low to moderate amounts, very little red meat, eggs somewhere around 0 to 4 times per week, and then and obviously sweets is at the lower end over here. So yeah, this is what we're going to use for today and kind of go through the Mediterranean diet together. So the Mediterranean diet is based on traditional foods from countries that surround the Mediterranean Sea, but you can obviously enjoy it with delicious, fresh, affordable foods from your local supermarket here in Canada. So we don't have to eat exactly like Greeks or Italians to get the same benefits, and we can even make some modifications based on some things that might be more common here in Canada than in other parts of the world. So how many countries are around the Mediterranean Sea? Little quick quiz. Would it be 4, 9, 22, or 29? So the answer is 22. So there's a lot of different countries that surround the Mediterranean Sea, everything from Western Europe, Southern Europe, the Middle East actually is part of it, North Africa as well. So you have lots of different cultures around the Mediterranean Sea, but there's also lots of similarities when it comes to the Mediterranean diet and these groups of countries that surround the sea. And so again, it's not just we think of Mediterranean diet, just think about Europe, but there's a lot of other influences too that make part of this really healthy and beneficial diet. In terms of the characteristics of the Mediterranean diet, so we saw a little bit of this at we looked at the pyramid, but again, it's high in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, cereals, potatoes, legumes, beans. That's all part of like your chickpeas, your lentils, kidney beans, and all that. Nuts and seeds. Olive oil is the major source of fat. So again, it's not a low-fat diet. You're looking at least 50 to 60 grams of fat per day. There's more seafood, more fish, and also it's lower in saturated fat by limiting red meat, butter, and cream. So in terms of the benefits of the Mediterranean diet, a lot of the studies have been shown mostly around the cardiovascular side of things. So if you look at the list here, it's been shown to improve overall blood lipids, cholesterol levels. It has shown to reduce the LDL cholesterol, or we call it sometimes the bad cholesterol. You can even think of L as in lousy. As a reminder, increases of HDL cholesterol, so the good one, H as in healthy, and also been shown to help with blood pressure control. And more studies are also looking at the benefits of Mediterranean diet are not just limited to cardiovascular health. There's been some studies showing that can really help also on the mental health side of things, and also on helping cognition and maintaining cognition over time and brain health. So, and memory and all that. So yeah, lots of other stuff too that can be beneficial. All right, so let's look at the different types of cholesterol that we can find in our blood. So if you ever do a blood test when your doctor is asking you to take a look at Your cholesterol levels, this is kind of what they'll be looking for. So you'll see here on the top of the list, LDL cholesterol. That's like the deposits of fats and cholesterol in your cells and arteries. That's something we obviously want to reduce. So we talked about it being bad. L as in lousy, as it can deposit and create plaque that can build up and cause cardiovascular issues down the road. On the other side, you have your HDL. We talked about it before, healthy cholesterol, and it helps remove cholesterol and fat from the arteries. So they kind of go around in your arteries and they pick up all those LDL molecules and bring them back to the liver to be recycled. You can almost look at it as the HDL is almost like a cleaner that's cleaning your arteries and picking up all the bad cholesterol and bringing it back to the liver, or it could even be like it's the people like to say it's like the police. They're coming in and they're picking up all the bandits, which can be the bad cholesterol, and then bringing it to the liver. So different ways of looking at it, but all to say the HDL really helps to help reduce the amount of plaque in your arteries. And another thing too is your triglycerides. So that's another type of fat in the blood that can accumulate, and something we want to keep an eye as well, because that can cause some issues such as inflammation of pancreas, pancreatitis, and yeah. So again, you want to just keep that in mind. Make sure it's not too high, and yeah. So this is like a quick little overview of when you do a kind of a lipid profile blood work with your doctor and what they can see. And obviously the total cholesterol you see on the right hand side of the picture. Total cholesterol will be a combination of a little bit of everything that you have there in your whole lipid profile. Alright, so let's take a look at the progression of atherosclerosis. So atherosclerosis, it's the buildup of plaque over time in your blood vessels, in your arteries. So if you look on the left-hand side at number 1 here, you have your normal blood vessel. So this is how an artery should look in a healthy individual. So you have lots of space. I'm just going to pencil this in. You see all the blood can just flow through easily in your artery, no problem. As you got this buildup of fatty streaks over here, so this is on the second phase, this is when blood cholesterol levels are elevated. Cholesterol begin to deposit inside the arteries and make this kind of plaque. Plaque is mostly a combination of fatty substance, like cholesterol, calcium, and other cellular debris. And as you can see, there's less and less space to travel through the artery. And this process actually starts quite young, as young as age 10. So even before the teenage years, where you can start developing some plaque. So this is not just a question that you went on a 2-week cruise and you ate more rich stuff, you ate more than you usually used to. It's not just that, it's going to create this. This is a long-term development thing that happens. Okay, look at stage 3 over here. This is a blood vessel with atherosclerosis. So more cholesterol is attaching. The plaque is getting much larger, as we can see here. There may be no pain or warning symptoms to indicate that this is happening. You have less space for the blood to go through. And we go on to stage 4, which is more advanced atherosclerosis. Obviously, very little space for the blood to go through. And the plaque in the arteries may become even large enough to completely block the artery. And when it does get to that point where it's completely blocked in stage 5 over here, the oxygenated blood cannot pass anymore. And this is where you might start getting warning signs of angina, like chest pain, and even heart attack or stroke may occur at this stage here. So this is why it's important to monitor our blood cholesterol levels and focus a lot on prevention and keeping up with your appointments with your doctors and incorporating healthy eating and good lifestyle choices. So as we saw on the last slide, there's lots of benefits of lowering our LDL cholesterol, as it may help decrease the risk of heart attack and stroke. It can also reduce the formation of new plaque. It can reduce the existing plaque, so not to say it will completely disappear, but it can help reduce the size and the amount gradually. And it can also prevent the rupture of existing plaque. So sometimes the rupture of existing plaque can sometimes break away and then go and lodge itself somewhere else in your arterial system. So these are all benefits for trying to really focus on reducing your bad cholesterol. So on the other hand, there's also benefits for increasing your good cholesterol, right? So we talked about HDL, good cholesterol, as an artery cleaner, or even like police that's circulating into your arteries. It takes cholesterol away from the arteries and returns it to the liver, where it's discarded or recycled. Obesity or weight gain, smoking cigarettes contribute to a lower level of HDL. If you're curious about numbers, when you're doing your blood work, for men, we're looking at ideally above 1.0, and for women, ideally 1.3. And sometimes, even with good lifestyle interventions, there's some people who just genetically will always have a lower HDL than what is listed over here. So just things to consider. And other thing I forgot to mention, often, if it's not genetic, a low HDL, when someone smokes, about after just 2 months, 2, 3 months, you can already start seeing a benefit where the HDL starts to rise up a bit gradually. So here's a picture just to give you an idea of the HDL that's kind of pushing out the bad cholesterol in your arteries. So again, the HDL carries cholesterol from the cells to the liver for excretion and reprocessing. The HDL particles like receptacles or a shovel for cholesterol. It takes up extra cholesterol from tissues and prevents the buildup of cholesterol in the arteries. A high level HDL seems to be very protective for any kind of heart disease. Again, that's why we call it the good cholesterol. We talked about smoking and overweight or obesity can sometimes cause levels to drop. But on the other hand, it's also important to say that exercise is one factor that can really help bring it up. And we'll go through a list of other things that can help as well to bring your HDL up. And here are the list of other factors that can help with raising your good cholesterol. So we talk about exercise, but when I talk about exercise, not just, it has to be for many months because it takes a while for the HDL to go up with exercise. So it has to be, it's not something you just do in the month of January for a month and hope it goes up. You have to do it for many, many months continuously, whatever it is, if it's walking or cycling or any kind of exercise, but it has to be continuous. Okay, so it's for many months on. Weight management, if there is a need for some weight loss, if you do notice that there is higher weight with lower HDL, often you don't need a lot of weight loss to get some benefits from that. We're looking at 3 to 5% weight loss of your current body weight can make a difference alone, so it doesn't have to be much. Focusing on healthy fats, olive oil, canola oils, nuts and seeds. Alcohol in moderation. We're going to have another slide on that later on in the presentation, but no more than 1 or 2 drinks daily. And we talked already about smoking cessation, where after already 2 months-ish, you start seeing an improvement in your HDL cholesterol in some cases. Just a quick slide here on weight gain and what it can change to in terms of our lipid profile. So in some cases, not always, but oftentimes when there is some weight gain, it can raise your total cholesterol, your bad cholesterol goes up. We talked already about the good cholesterol can go down. Your triglycerides can also go up. It can also increase insulin resistance, so that can put you at higher risk for prediabetes and diabetes. And can also increase your high blood pressure. So this is just some things in there that need to be considered, especially as I'm filming this presentation. It's during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we have seen that again for many different reasons. Weight gain is something that's been happening throughout the pandemic, and this is why through that there is the risk that other issues can arise from that. So we just talked about weight gain, how it may cause certain changes to our cholesterol, our blood pressure, and all that. But it may not always be just weight. It's also where is your weight being deposited, right? So we talk about abdominal obesity or weight gain around the abdominal region, because that's where all the organs are, and that's where we call more buildup of visceral fat. So visceral fat here is all the fat cells surrounding organs and tissues. And this can increase the risk of chronic disease more so than fat deposited at other parts in the body. So yeah, if you're looking at a scale, that might not always be a clear indicator of what's going on. But if ever you're curious and you want to measure around your waist circumference, that can be a really good indicator to kind of see in terms of the visceral fat component. For men, anything more than 40-inch waist, or 102 centimeters for women, more than 35 inches, 88 centimeters. And it's not just measuring around your belly button, it's measuring between your hip bone and your lower rib. There's videos you can find online if you go on YouTube and search if you're curious to do this, or something you can do also with your clinicians, your practitioners in the clinic as well. So again, just another indicator that can often be better than just a weight and a scale to get a better idea of the situation. So how does the Mediterranean diet help Overall, the diet is low in saturated fat and high in those monounsaturated fats such as olive oil, so it can really help in the lipid profile of things. Lots of emphasis on healthy whole foods, so less processed foods. High in complex carbs, so whole grains and legumes, so higher fiber content. As we can see in the next point here, both soluble and insoluble. The soluble version really helps decrease that LDL cholesterol, and we're going to go through all of these together. High in antioxidants such as beta-carotene, vitamin E and C, magnesium, potassium, and polyphenols, all nutrients that have been shown to be very beneficial on the cardiovascular side of things as well as other ways for our body. Low in sodium as well, so that can help on the blood pressure side of things, and it's oftentimes tasty and quite easy to follow, and you can easily adapt it to whatever your likes and dislikes are. Good. So now let's move on and really look at the specifics of the pyramid of the Mediterranean diet. So we're going to make our way from the bottom at the foundation of it and build our way up and talk about every little component. The first one being daily physical activity that really makes the building block, the foundation of the Mediterranean diet. So in terms of physical activity exercise, here I just listed the Canadian guidelines. So the emphasis is on an active lifestyle, so combining physical activity and exercise. So the difference being between the two is physical activity is anything that has movement. So if you're may that be gardening, or if it's active transport, or if you're just being active around your home in any kind of way, and movement. Exercise is more planned, it's more intentional, and has a purpose for either, for example, you're doing yoga because you want to try and build more range of motion, or you're going for brisk walks or fast-paced walks or jogging because you want to try and build your endurance. That's kind of the difference. So active lifestyles when you combine that physical activity and exercise component as part of your lifestyle. The guidelines are 150 minutes of exercise per week, so 30 minutes 5 times per week. It can be broken down in different segments, 10-minute blocks as needed, and incorporating some resistance exercise can be very beneficial as well. So guidelines are 2 times a week because that can help a lot with bone strength. It can help a lot with also maintaining muscle mass. So again, the key here is finding what makes you happy and what's fun and something you can do long term. Because if there's an exercise that you know it's probably maybe the best for you, but it's not something you enjoy, you're probably not going to do it for long term. So really finding what works for you is key. So now we're going to look at the first part of the food sections here in the Mediterranean diet. So looking at the whole group of starch and grain products, which again provides the bulk of the carbohydrates in this Mediterranean diet. So let's go ahead and look at that. So in terms of carbohydrates, there's different categories. All right. So we talk about our simple carbohydrates and our complex. So if we talk about simple carbs, we're looking at anything like that sugars that are from, let's say, fruit sugar, which would be fructose. And there's corn or grape sugar, which is dextrose or glucose. And you also have your table sugar, which is a sucrose molecule. Complex carbs, on the other hand, include everything made of 3 or more linked sugars, so more of a complex structure. The digestive system, though, will handle all these carbohydrates in the same way. So break them down, or tries to break them down to these single sugar molecules, since only these small molecules can pass through the bloodstream. And it converts most digestible carbohydrates into glucose, which is also known as our blood sugar, because cells are designed to use this as a universal source of energy, especially the brain. One of the main sources of the brain is glucose. Fiber is an exception to all of this because it's put together in a way that it can't be broken down into sugar molecules, so it passes through the body undigested. And fiber contributes to satiety, makes you feel full. And know that there is also combinations here, right? So in terms of the categories, let's say you look at your fruit, for example, it's going to have some simple carbs, which will have, for example, fructose could be one you'll find in fruit, but it'll also have some complex carbs like the fiber inside, which provides satiety, especially in the skin of fruit. So it's not really always like one or the other. Sometimes you can have combinations as part of the food that you're eating in terms of carbohydrates. You've probably heard the importance of eating whole grains due to its benefits, but first of all, what is a whole grain? What is a whole grain product? So foods made from the entire grain seed, usually called a kernel, which consists of the bran, the germ, and the endosperm. Those are 3 parts of the anatomy of the whole grain. So if the kernel itself has been cracked, crushed, or flaked, it must retain the same relative proportions of the bran, germ, endosperm as the original grain as it was in the field when it was cultivated to be called a whole grain. So the next question could be, then what is whole wheat? We talk about whole wheat flour and whole wheat products. So whole wheat, by definition, it has to have 95% of the same proportions as it was when it was in the field. So whole grain has to be 100% those same proportions. So whole wheat would be about 95%. So it's very close to the whole grain. So that is, by definition, the difference between whole grain and whole wheat, if you were wondering. Here we have a list of different whole grain products. So again, we talked about whole wheat before, oats and oatmeal, especially the ones that take longer to cook are usually less processed as well. So if you're talking about your instant oats versus maybe your steel cut oats, for example, there's a big difference in cooking time between the two. So that's a good way of remembering what is more whole, would be longer cooking time oats. Popcorn, brown wild rice, rye. Rye is also pretty good in terms of the glycemic index, so it helps. It's not as high to bring your sugar up. Whole grain barley, buckwheat, triticale, bulgur, millet, and quinoa. They're all good examples of whole grain products. So as you probably know, at this point is you'll have fiber in whole grains, right? And fiber is an integral part of the Mediterranean diet. It has a lot of benefits on the cardiovascular side, but it's also been shown to help as well with weight management because it has that piece where it can help you feel full longer as it slows down the food as it passes through your gut. And so by slowing it down, you have more satiety. The fiber needs vary for individuals. It can be anywhere in that like 25, 35 gram range, depending if you're male, female, if you're 65 years or older or younger. They're also lower glycemic index. So I mentioned that word just the last slide. Lower glycemic index, meaning that it gives less of a spike in your blood sugar. So that's also very important for not just preventing prediabetes or diabetes, but also people who are living with those conditions. It can be very useful. And yeah, and as I just mentioned, helps to control blood glucose. So those are all big benefits in fiber. So now we're going to look at the next slides at the differences in different groups of fiber. So on one end, you have your soluble fiber. I'll put a lot of emphasis on this because this is the type of fiber that's been shown to really help in terms of reducing cholesterol levels. So this is found in some vegetables, fruits, some grains, especially psyllium and oats. Psyllium is actually what's added in the Metamucil product. That's a supplement you can purchase in the pharmacies. Legumes, so again, your chickpeas, black, red, kidney beans, lentils, all that family, and as well as ground flax. So it can help really at reducing your LDL cholesterol, but it can also help as well as reducing your blood sugars. So it helps on both those fronts. So on the other hand, now here we have insoluble fiber. So this one here, it's found in the skins of fruits and vegetables as well as bran. I have to say, like again, not all foods will have one or the other fiber. Many foods contain both types. Just important to mention. This one can help prevent constipation and promote a healthy gut. I forgot to mention in the last slide that soluble fiber can really also help with management of diarrhea in some cases. To help give the stool, being a soluble fiber, it can help give the stool a bit more shape and form from its liquid state. And know that the insoluble fiber here doesn't have the same effect as the other fiber in terms of its lipid profile, but it's still important part for having a healthy gut. And in general, fiber is important in this whole piece with cardiovascular health because there is a link with constipation and having to strain to have a bowel movement and cardiac events. Because if you're straining when you're trying to have a bowel movement, that can increase your blood pressure. And by increasing your blood pressure, that can also affect potentially your heart rate, and that can lead to a cardiac event in some cases. So this is the correlation where having enough fiber in your diet, regular bowel movements can sometimes help and on that front with the cardiovascular side. Moving on now, we're going to go take a look at the pyramid again, and moving on up, we're going to see the category of beans, legumes, nuts, and seeds. So let's start with the legumes first. So it's important to say that legumes are a source of plant-based protein, so a nice alternative to meat. Very high in fiber, especially the soluble fiber we talked about before. Vitamin, minerals as well. I have to say, can be also very affordable, and it's not on the slide here, but legumes can be a very affordable option to get a lot of nutrients. And the guidelines for the Mediterranean diet is to try and have at least Eat legumes 3 times a week. So if it's you're adding it to your soups, you're adding it to your salads, you're making recipes, you're cooking with it, or whatever it is, you like 3 times a week is the guidelines to meet the Mediterranean diet. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You can buy them canned, just rinse them, take off the excess sodium. If you get them dried, it takes a bit longer, but it's even cheaper that way. Just need to soak it overnight, empty the water the next day, and then put new water in and cook it for at least give or take an hour or more or less, depending on consistency you're looking for. So no, they are a great item to have in your kitchen. Moving on to nuts and seeds. So some studies show that having nuts and seeds, because they have good fats, can help improve your good cholesterol. So obviously choose unsalted when possible for less sodium. Raw nuts, walnuts, almonds, pecans, pistachios, whatever you like. Seeds, pumpkin, sunflower, chia, flax, hemp hearts. They all have their own benefits. Some people will ask me which one is the best. I say they're all unique in their own way. They all have their own little benefits. So I'd say pick the one that you like the most, because if I tell you walnuts is the best, but you really don't like it, that's probably not something you're going to stick with for too long. But pick a nut or seed that you like, you enjoy, and you can have it regularly. Just be aware that even though they're very nutritious, they can also be very high in calories. So a quarter cup of nuts and seeds on average is about 200 calories. So that can fill up really quick. It's not so much. Remember, with the Mediterranean guidelines, the guidelines are if you can have nuts once a week at least. You could have it more, but at least once a week. That's where it's shown to have some benefits for your overall health. Okay, so let's take a look now. Again, our pyramid, and we're going to move on to the famous olive oil that we often hear about being so healthy and beneficial. So let's dive into that and take a look. One of the reasons being that olive oil is considered a healthy option is because it's mostly based on monounsaturated fat. So you look on the top of the title here, you see, I'll just separate over here, monounsaturated fat. So it's an unsaturated fat versus compared to saturated fats, which we'll talk about after. And it can help to reduce the amount of bad cholesterol in our body. Well, obviously olive oil has some, but also canola oil will be another option where you can get some monounsaturated fats, nuts and seeds, as we've seen before. Each teaspoon of oil is about 5 grams of fat. And if you're having, give or take, 60 grams of fat a day, you ideally don't want to go anywhere above 20 grams from saturated or trans fat. And we're going to go more in detail of what saturated trans fat is and what that means. But yeah, you want your diet to be mostly based on monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fats, which we're going to be looking at in the next few slides. Now we're going to jump in and take a look at polyunsaturated fats. So this is here the arrow is pointing at the fish because that's part of it, and then we're going to look at the other options as well that include these kind of fats. Polyunsaturated fat. So again, if you look over here, like we talked about mono before, I'm just putting a line in between. So we got polyunsaturated fats. It's considered a healthy choice because they reduce the amount of bad cholesterol in the body. But there's two groups, right? We have your omega-6 and your omega-3s. So that's what we're gonna look at together. Omega-3, a lot of you might have heard about it before, but it's considered an essential fat, meaning that our bodies cannot make this fat. Therefore, we have to find in our diet to be able to make use of it in our bodies. All right, let's start by looking at the omega-6 first. So this one may help to reduce your bad cholesterol in the body, but in general, we have enough omega-6 in our day. This is not the one that we have to try and look for. Most Canadians eat more than enough omega-6. So I'm talking about your poultry, eggs, corn, soybean, nuts, seeds, sunflower oil, and meats. And as you'll probably notice too, you see nuts and seeds coming up a few times. So remember that, like fiber, there's different fibers in foods. There's different fats in foods. It's not just polyunsaturated or mono or they often have a combination. But yeah, typically we have enough omega-6, so it's not something we need to aim for and get more of. And you'll notice too, corn, soybeans, sunflower oil, those are also products that can be often found in processed goods because, again, it's just a common ingredient, probably also for cheaper to use. So if we're having a lot of processed food, we're probably having a lot of omega-6 on top of that too from these items, so things to consider. But now we'll look more at the omega-3 side. Next slide. Okay, so now on the other side, the omega-3s, So these are the ones that are really interesting that we should really focus on. So they may prevent cardiovascular diseases, and in general, we do not consume enough omega-3 in a day in comparison to the omega-6, where I said we have more than enough. So the ratio, there's a big difference between the ratio of how much omega-6 and omega-3 we have. And there's some studies that looked at that and how do we kind of close that gap a little bit. And remember, they are essential. That means our body cannot make it, so you have to get it from your diet. And the studies, what are they showing about omega-3s, especially from the fish space? I'm going to show you the next slide where you get omega-3s. But it's people who consume enough usually have lower triglycerides. We talked about that before, that being a type of fat in our blood we want to try and lower. It can slow the buildup of plaque in the arteries. It can help control our blood pressure, make our arteries more elastic, and it can reduce the risk of death, heart attack, and dangerous heart rhythms, abnormal heart rhythms that we can have, and obviously stroke and any other cardiovascular events. So they're very important and something we need to try and get more in our diet for most Canadians. So let's look at the other slide and see where do you find omega-3. So in the same way that we have, we divided our polyunsaturated fat to two categories. You have omega-6, omega-3. You can also take the omega-3 and divide that into two other categories to where you can find your omega-3. So you have your EPA, DHA category that's over here. So you don't have to know the whole acronym, but I'll say what it is. It's eicosapentaenoic acid and docosapentazoic acid. So hard to say, you don't have to remember that, it's just the acronym is fine. But the marine species of omega-3. So this is the one that's shown the most benefits from the omega-3 categories, okay? So your fatty fish, salmon, herring, mackerel, trout, sardines. Sole, a little bit less, it's more leaner fish, but a little bit there, halibut. So the fattier the fish, the more omega-3 you're going to get. If you compare that to leaner fish, especially in the whitefish side of things, you'll have less omega-3s. So this bulk of the benefits of omega-3s comes from these species. You get the ALA as well. So that's the alpha-linolenic acid. That one is plant-based omega-3. So that one you're looking at flaxseed oil, walnuts, ground flax, chia seeds, walnut oil, canola oil, hemp hearts, omega-3 eggs. Again, the reason why you have omega-3 eggs is because they feed them flaxseed to the chickens. So there's benefits there as well. And there can be some conversion in your body where some ALA can transform into more of the EPA, DHA in your body, but to a very small percentage. So you can get all the omega-3s are listed here, but definitely putting more emphasis on the EPA, DHA, those marine fish species. That's where you get a lot more bang for your buck. So, and the cardioprotective benefits of all these omega-3s, especially the EPA, DHA, is antiarrhythmic, so really helping with your heart rhythm and maintaining the heart rhythm, reducing the formation of blood clots, can reduce triglycerides, and also increase your good cholesterol, the HDL, anti-inflammatory benefits, as well as lowering blood pressure, so keeping your arteries healthy and elastic to make sure that they're able to really move and let that blood flow go through. Yeah, and I didn't mention this before, but the benefits also with this Mediterranean diet and also consuming omega-3s, it reduces all those cardiovascular events. But even if someone had a cardiovascular event, if they had a heart attack or a stroke, maintaining a Mediterranean diet and eating omega-3s reduces the risk for having another event. That's where it's very beneficial. So again, it's important to get your omega-3s for sure. So the guidelines for reaching your omega-3 fat intake. If you like fish, good, because if you're eating a variety, ideally the oily fatty fish we just looked at last slide, 2 portions of 100 grams weekly. 100 grams is more or less a deck of cards, give or take. You get all your omega-3 fats for the week. You're good. You don't need anything else. And if you don't like fatty fish and if you don't like a lot of the other omega-3s we looked at, you may consider a supplement, but ideally an EPA DHA base. So look at the labels, make sure it's not just an ALA like the plant-based supplement. And even for people who are vegans, they can get a algae-based omega-3 supplement that will have mostly DHA in it. So again, if you're not sure, speak to your when you go speak to your physician, your pharmacist, or your dietitian, whoever you're working with, to get them different ideas and options, especially if you don't consume any fish at all or any other omega-3s that we looked at. Back to our pyramid. Next step is we're going to look at dairy and meats, but specifically the reason we're looking at that is looking at saturated fat and that link with with heart disease and health. So we're going to move on to that now. So saturated fat, what I'm saying is you don't need to cut it out completely at all. But it's really just controlling the amount you eat. Okay, and the reason being is it will increase your LDL cholesterol, right? It's going to bring that up. So where do you find your saturated fat? It's everything. A good rule of thumb is think of anything that's fat from an animal source. Okay, except for a tropical oil, so palm and coconut. So animal source fat, looking at your lard, fat from dairy products, right? So if you're looking at butter, cheese, creams, vegetable shortening. So all these products will be higher in saturated fat. And some people will ask me, well, I heard coconut oil can be good. It can help maybe even bring up my good cholesterol. So it's true, some studies will show that, and this is the case for saturated fat in general sometimes. Sometimes where your HDL can go up a bit, but your LDL goes up in a higher proportion. So that's the issue there. Yes, it's true, it can maybe help your HDL go up a bit, but it's not proportionate to how much your bad cholesterol will increase. So let's look at the next slide and just give some tips of how you can control the amount of saturated fat. So if you're just looking at controlling the amount of saturated fat, let's look at, let's say, cheese, for example. Often cheese in the front of the package will have a milk fat percentage content right in the front. I'm not talking about the back of the label, I'm talking about the front, next to the humidity there. Cheeses with less than 25% milk fat can be a target that will reduce the amount of saturated fat. Milk and yogurt, you can go with 2% milk fat or less. You don't necessarily have to go to 0. Even 1 to 2% is fine. You can substitute cream for milk. You can substitute butter for canola oil or other plant-based oils. Margarine, for example, is not the same as it was in the 80s and 90s now. You don't have that partially hydrogenated trans fats, which we might touch base after. So if you're having a margarine that's maybe a canola olive oil base, could be interesting. And choosing leaner cuts of meats, right? Because there is still, if you think about red meat has high protein, it has high iron, and it has other vitamins and minerals, which can be beneficial. It's just sometimes when you're having too much, and if you're having a cut that has too much fat on it, or just too high fat, saturated fat, that's where it may get problematic if you have it at a regular basis. So, I'm just going to read out a few leaner cuts so you can aim for, eye of round roast and steak, sirloin tip side steak, top round roast, bottom round roast, top sirloin. So, and if you're not sure, you can even ask your butcher. Ask them what kind of cut you have as a leaner cut of meat, and that can be a way to help you choose a lower saturated fat option. So now just let's look at some numbers here, because just to give you some idea, remember we said ideally no more than 20 grams of saturated fat a day, so keep that in mind. So here I have some examples, but this is only for a 2.5 ounce portion. Okay, I'm not saying that's the portion you should be having, it's just an example. So that's a little bit less than a deck of cards. It's, again, you can have more, you can have less, all depending on your nutrient needs, but this is just to compare the amount of saturated fat here. So you look at salmon, for 2.5 ounces, you have about 1.9 grams saturated fat. And you can compare that to, let's say, a T-bone steak, 5.6. And the reason, and you can even sometimes even see it when you're picking up your meats, the more marbling you have, the more of the marbling and the whitish kind of streaks you see, that's saturated fat. And you can see that difference. And if you compare, let's say, T-bone steak, I'll go down to the pork tenderloin over here. You see on this here, there's very little marbling or very little white streaks, and you have much less saturated fat. And the same goes if you go look at chicken, very low, 0.4 grams saturated fat, very low. Duck, a little bit here. Also depends on the skin. If you have skin on poultry, duck, chicken, turkey, the skin is where you have more saturated fat in the poultry, but still a lot less than certain other cuts of meats. If you hunt, and if, let's say, you have moose as an example, again, you'll look at the moose, there's very little streaks, like white streaks, so that's also very low in saturated fat. So it's not to say that all red meats are necessarily high in saturated fat. You can have some that are leaner options, but you still want to limit your amount of red meat to no more than 15 ounces per week, because there is still a link with red meat and consumption and maybe certain types of cancers. So no more than 15 ounces a week could also just be a general target, and aiming for leaner cuts of red meat if that's something you eat on a regular basis. Just to share something on trans fats. So some good news is that as of September 2020, artificial trans fats, also known as partially hydrogenated trans fats, were started to be banned in Canada to help reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease because they discovered that these trans fats increased your bad cholesterol and decreased your good cholesterol. So it worked in two harmful ways for our bodies. So they now have been gradually banned in our food supply in Canada. You can still, however, find natural trans fats, you sort of say, in dairy products, certain meats, and refined vegetable oils. Refined because with the processing, with the high heat, when they process the refined oils, vegetable oils, the processing can create some natural trans fat. And the same can be as well if you're at home and if you're deep frying with the same oil over and over, there can be natural trans fats that can occur, as well if you're buying any kind of deep fried product or anything like that the oil has been used in very high heat. So yeah, again, so just things you still want to minimize, same as saturated fat, and just things to be aware moving forward. But it's good that we definitely removed the ban of partially hydrogenated fats, trans fats, and that was the whole story with margarine back in the 80s and 90s. It had a lot of partially hydrogenated fats, so it was marketed as a substitute, a healthy substitute to butter, but in fact it was actually quite harmful. So again, most margins now are not the same at all as the past. So yeah, so that's the story with the partially hydrogenated trans fat ban. So previously, there was those artificial trans fats were often found in a lot of the prepackaged and fast food products, and because the chemical process of creating these partially hydrogenated trans fats is it helped increase the shelf life of products. So products could stay on the shelf longer, and I guess in that way save money for some food companies. But again, because it was so harmful for our health, they've now been banned. So this is just an FYI to know where you could mostly have found them in the past. Quick summary about trans and saturated fat. Too much, again, can increase your bad cholesterol. So the goal is really try and make sure you don't have more than 20 grams per day of saturated trans fat. And remember, I'll have some clients who will tell me they'll look at a label and they'll look at, let's say, nuts and seeds. We talked about how nuts and seeds are so beneficial, and they'll say, oh, there's a little bit of saturated fat in my peanuts or something. And remember, it's you're going to find combinations here and there of different types of fats, but it's finding that balance where you're getting more of the unsaturated fats, more of the omega-3s, using more monounsaturated fats like olive oil, canola oil, and that's where you're going to get a lot of benefits. So remember, you're not trying to go down to zero. It's okay to have a little bit of saturated and trans fat. It's just really making sure it's not in excess. That's the story, and remembering that foods will have combinations of these different fats. It's not just one or the other. They can have a variety of some fats and for some products. Okay, now for the story about wine and alcohol and its part in the Mediterranean diet. Let's go ahead and look at that now. So really the key message here when we talk about alcohol in the Mediterranean diet is alcohol in moderation. And to know that there is no benefit to start drinking if you don't currently drink any alcohol. And so the studies show that in moderate amounts for people with no clinical conditions, it may slightly improve your good cholesterol. We talk about red wine because red wine has a little bit more antioxidants than some of the other alcohols. But again, just a slight level. And when I'm talking moderation, I'm talking about the lower end of the recommendations that are listed over here. So for women, 0 to 2 drinks a day with a 10 drink maximum per week. For men, 0 to 3 drinks per day with a 15 maximum cap. And quickly looking at this, it can still be a lot in some cases, this 10 to 15 drinks per week. And if you're wondering what is a drink, so at the bottom here you're listed, so if you're having some kind of liquor, or 1.5 ounces is one drink, wine glass 5 ounces or 150 milliliters, and beer will be 12 ounces, so yeah, 360 milliliters for that. So again, if you don't drink, there's not a really strong benefit to start drinking, and if you do already drink and maybe you drink more than the guidelines, just bringing that down could already be beneficial in some ways. So yeah, that's it for the alcohol bit. So in terms of seasoning and salts, the Mediterranean diet favors the use of fresh and dried herbs, garlic, onions, leeks, tomatoes, citrus fruit to add flavor to your dishes. Using the salt shaker especially, or using salt in any in in your recipes needs to be limited if you're using many prepackaged products or if you are living with hypertension, because we see the link between salt intake and the rise in your blood pressure. But most Canadians are eating too much salt, and that is mostly because it's coming from a lot of restaurant meals, coming from a lot of processed foods. So again, it's trying to maybe flavor more so with different type of ingredients to when you're following the Mediterranean diet. So talking about blood pressure, we just mentioned that excess sodium can contribute to increasing blood pressure. Again, from restaurant foods, processed food, canned goods, or adding just adding too much salt in our food. So our intake should be around, if you're curious about numbers, 1,500 to 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. So now on the next slide, I'm going to just kind of give you an idea what is that like. And remember, you do need sodium. So you still need at least 1,500 milligrams a day to replace the sodium you lose to your sweat, to your urine, and to your feces. It helps with fluid balance in your body, so you do need some. It's just here, you see the guidelines are here. Most Canadians have above 3,000 easily. So let's look at some examples. So which food item contains more sodium? So here, I'll just take my pen. So remember, we're looking at 1,500 to 2,300 milligrams per day. So just one Big Mac has about 1,000 milligrams a day. So you already almost got all your needs just from the sandwich itself. And then you might go to Subway and say, I'm going to go for a lower sodium choice, but you're looking at pretty much the same thing. This is for a Subway club, so again, more of the deli meats will have a higher sodium content there. Maybe too, if depending on the sauce that's added to, there might be some bread. Also, surprisingly, will have some salt as a preservative inside. Cheerios, 160 milligrams. So again, you can find that in your grains. Small bag of Miss Vicky's chips, 210 milligrams, and that's again the small bag. So if you're having more, if you're having a larger bag, you can definitely increase sodium up quick there. 1 tablespoon of reduced soy sauce. That's just 1 tablespoon. So if you're having sushi or anything else, you're probably getting a lot higher than that. And here, if you're making chicken broth, this is just 1 cup. So if you're trying to have a soup and you're making maybe 2-3 cups worth for your serving, you alone will have enough sodium for your day, already almost there. So again, this is just not considering the rest of your day. These are just some examples to show you that sodium can be a little bit in everything that we eat. So just be mindful. You can always look at the labels, and we do have a presentation on reading labels on our website. So you can always look at that too if you need more help to better understand how that works. You have to remember also how much sodium is in one teaspoon of salt. So 1 teaspoon of salt, you're looking at around 2,300 milligrams of sodium. So the salt we add as well in our recipes and our day-to-day can add up quick. So just something to be mindful of as well as you're preparing your meals. So you could add a little bit of salt, but just remember excess can add up pretty quick. And if you want some more examples of where sodium is found in food, you can go ahead and take a look at this website over here. It gives you a list and quantities of how much sodium you can find for more information. And now, finally, we're going to go and finish off with liquids, the importance of water and liquids in the part of the Mediterranean diet for the last few slides. So the main point here with liquids in the Mediterranean diet is make water your normal go-to drink at most meals and throughout the day, okay? And if you're getting also lots of fruits and veggies in your day as part of this diet, you'll be getting a lot of liquids from those as well, because a lot of them are full of water as well. Tea, herbal teas, coffee moderate amounts. I mean, no more than 4 cups a day for it to be considered as part of liquids for hydration can also be good choices. As a squeeze of fruit juice to your water for extra flavor, adding fruits inside or herbs. Those are all other options to kind of give you some more taste and flavor. That's what you're looking for. Alright, so here's just a few tips for some Mediterranean diet swaps. So not to say that the items on the left are bad, it's just necessarily just showing you that if you want to get closer to Mediterranean diet, these are some examples of changes you could do. So instead of, for example, mayonnaise in your sandwich, you could try hummus as a spread. Butter on your toast, you could try adding maybe some olive oil or any kind of nut butter for different types of monounsaturated fats. Meat in your pasta sauce. You can actually just throw in more veg in your sauce. Or you can even reduce some of the meat and throw in some blended lentils if you want, or any other kind of bean you can blend inside your sauce. That can be another option for some plant-based protein and other nutrients. Chocolate cake, you can spread that, switch that up for some kind of fruit and yogurt sauce. Would be more in line with the Mediterranean diet. Bagel with jam, could be oatmeal with berries or Greek yogurt with granola. So again, these are all just some examples. But if you want more ideas, more examples, you can see at the bottom here of the slide, I'm gonna underline it over here. The bottom here, that's a website, oldwayspt.org. So that's a website that gives you a lot of recipes and ideas to follow Mediterranean diet and doing some diet swaps. So there's a lot more information here. This is just a few examples. I encourage you to go and visit that website if you want more information. Before we wrap up, I just want to share with you a very simple tool that can help kind of guide you into the changes you can make to get closer to the Mediterranean diet. So there's this tool called the Mediterranean Diet Score Tool. What it is it asks you 14 questions of components that are part of the Mediterranean diet, and it kind of gives you an idea of how many of those components are you following and how close is your current diet to the Mediterranean diet. And the studies show that a higher score is associated with better heart and mental health and a 32% reduction risk of depression. So whatever your baseline score is, the idea is if you can at least score 2 more points, that has been shown to provide some benefits to your overall health. So on our website you can find that, and if you're not sure, you can always contact our secretaries at the clinic, and you'll have that questionnaire available to try out. Great, so thank you so much for listening. I hope this was useful to you. And remember, you can always go back if there was a piece or part that you missed in the presentation. That's the beauty of having this already recorded. So go ahead, go back and review. And yeah, again, I hope it was helpful, and I wish you all a pleasant day. Thank you.